Hi, and welcome to the webinar, the Introduction to TSA webinar that we're hosting to help you better understand how to bring TSA into your building or how to make your existing TSA chapter maybe even better. So we appreciate you joining. I do want to let you know this will be recorded and we'll post it to YouTube. We had several teachers say they would love to have access to the information, but unfortunately couldn't make the 4 o'clock Skype call this afternoon. So it will be recorded. I currently have the audience muted. I'll unmute you at the end for questions. If you want to use the chat function within Skype to post a question, I'll get to those at the end as well. So with that said, I want to go through and kind of help you understand a lot of the nuances that come along with any organization, and TSA is no different. Make sure you have access to a lot of the links that you're going to need. And kind of help you just paint a picture within your classroom of how you could incorporate TSA during school, after school, depending on how you want to set it up. So with that, I'm going to jump over to a PowerPoint, and I will share this out after the meeting as well. I tried to build this almost like a handbook that you can go through it and click on links to take you to places. So there was also an attachment with the agenda, which kind of basically just mirrors the PowerPoint that I'm going through. So first of all, I want to make sure that you're aware that we do have an app. So this was live as of last year. The TSA app is currently live in the Apple App Store or the iOS App Store, as well as the Google Play Store. Two different names. So in the App Store, you can see there on your screen, it is KYTSA to search for. Google Play, it's called KY Tech Student Association. But that has access to our entire calendar of events, a lot of the activities that we do. It'll have the entire conference, state conference itinerary built into it, the schedule for all the events for students to use, and a lot more things get built into that as needed. So it's kind of, it's a great tool to have right there on your smartphone. So we encourage you to download that app. Two websites make sure that you're aware of. The national TSA website is tsaweb.org. And then our Kentucky website is kentuckytsa.org. So both of them have lots of information, probably overwhelming if you're just going through and trying to click to find things. That's one of the points of this webinar today, is to kind of lead you to just the things you really need to understand, especially if you're just getting into TSA, and not overwhelm you with a lot of the other the bonuses that there are to TSA. So, just kind of dipping your toes in and not diving in head first. So a couple things I want to point you to on our Kentucky website. We do have a lot of videos posted. So there's a conference review, which would kind of get your kids excited about TSA and what's going on, what it looked like last year. So if you have not attended the state conference before, that's going to help you understand kind of what the look and the feel of what it was like last year. TSA Times, this is our newsletter that the state officers put out quarterly. So I would make sure that you receive that, which you should, since you're on. If you're a TSA advisor, you would. If you're not, you can subscribe through the website to get that newsletter. And then social media is a big piece to that, especially for students. So make sure they understand that we're on Snapchat, Instagram, and Twitter. There's 3 pages that I want to direct you to specifically on the KentuckyTSA.org website. So the first one is called Governance. So this has our bylaws on it. It has the minimum dress code policy for the state conference, as well as any meeting that we have, our agenda, as well as the minutes that go along with that. So just a good place. When you go out to Kentucky TSA, it's under About Us, so you can get to it in Governance there. Another page I want to direct you to is under the Advisors button. So you can just click on Advisors. So this kind of helps you as an advisor, kind of a one-stop shop of any links that we think that you're going to need to have access to, rather than having to go Google or search for them. So there's a piece on here about marketing materials. How do you market TSA to your students in your school building that maybe not be aware of it? Some things on parliamentary procedures. So if you're interested in having students go through Robert's Rules of Order and that sort of thing. And then helpful tips guides. We're going to go through some of these a little bit later. And there's also links to any TSA chapter in Kentucky that we know of that has a website. So this may be a good place to go and see what Lyon County's doing, or go see what Meade County's doing. If your chapter is not on here, but you have a website, feel free to email that to me. It's mark.harrell, Harrell, at education.ky.gov, and we'll add a button for your chapter as well. This was just Google searching to find what we could find when we ran through this last year. So that's another important link, is the advisors page. And then we also have the for students page. So once again, under for students, there's going to be information on competitions, the store if they need to buy any dress clothes or TSA apparel or promotional items or anything like that, as well as some information on the student leadership day that we have. And then once again, a link to those chapter websites. So your state officers, or your chapter officers, sorry, may want to see what other chapters' websites might look like. Let's see. So over winter break, one of my main goals is to refresh the entire website and make sure all the links are accurate for the 2018 regional, state, and national conferences. So do know over break, I'll send an email out after break when that's all cleaned up, links to everything that will need to be filled out or completed for the 2018 conferences coming up. That'll all happen over winter break. So by the first week of January, everything should be fresh and ready to go for the new state conference this year. So be patient on that for me. So I wanted to plug our leadership conference. TSA in Kentucky, I can't really track down when the last time we had one, but this is an important component that goes along with Kentucky TSA, and I'm sure someone out there may know when the last leadership conference was. But anyway, we're going to try to bring that back this year. And the goal is to get local chapter officers from your local TSA chapter to come in, participate in some activities, and then be able to take those activities back and incorporate those in your local chapters with all the other members. So kind of scale it that way, where you're bringing in your chapter officers, and then they go back and they can train all of your members in your TSA chapter. We'll have a separate breakout for advisors just to talk about how to use the Student Leadership Challenge in your classroom or after school during your TSA club meetings. And then also talk about some things getting ready for state conference, because it's at the end of April, but it'll be here before we know it. So that event is 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern time, and you can find out more about it once again on our website if you go under conferences. And then it's the top one, fall leadership. So you can find out more about that, as well as the regional, state, and national conferences. Once again, we try to use the Kentucky website as a one-stop shop, so you don't have to go search the national website for links. If there's something you think should be on here and is not, please let us know. We can add that very quickly. So another thing I want to draw your attention to, last year we designated regions in Kentucky, which hadn't really been spelled out formally in the past. So we do have an East region now, which you can see over here in blue. Central region is in gray, and then we have our West region. All the stars are affiliated TSA chapters as of about mid-November. So red ones are middle schools, blue ones are high schools, and then the yellow dots you see on this map are our conference locations. So regional is at Murray State for the West, Central is at EKU, East is at Morehead State, and then state conferences in Louisville at the Crown Plaza at the end of April. This is also out on our main webpage, right on the home page, so you can actually click on this map and it will take you out to, I gotta move a box here. It'll take you out to the web. It'll look similar to this. Mine, you can see that it has edit rights, but you'll be able to click on these. It'll tell you about that chapter and also who the teacher is, so you could reach out to them or the chapter advisor if you're interested in who's next door to you that may or may not have a chapter. We'll update this again over break, so we've had about 5 schools register in the past 2 weeks. So we'll update and add, and make sure you get a star on the map for your chapter as well. So I talked about regional, so save the date. You're allowed to leave your region to go to a competition. We do have some schools that are in the central region, for example, that go to Moorhead. We have some that are kind of in the west central area and they go to Murray instead of EKU. We just try to designate those regions to help you understand the closest regional site, but you are allowed to go to the next one over if maybe you have a scheduling conflict or something else may come up. So the Central Kentucky, which is CKTSA, you can see is February 23rd. Eastern Kentucky, which is EKTSA, is at Moorhead, March 2nd. And then Western Murray State, February 22nd. I heard someone just jump on and it's getting a little bit of an echo, so I'm going to mute everybody. And then at the end, I'll turn the recording off, and if you have questions at the end, feel free to ask them at that time. But yeah, I'm just going to mute everybody so I don't get a lot of feedback on this recording, because this will be posted to YouTube when we're done. Once again, kentuckytsa.org/regional, so you can find out a lot more about these events. Keep in mind, those of you that are new, the regional events are one day, so we can't simply, because there's 30 plus events for high school and 30 plus events for middle school, not every region hosts every event. At this point, we're not big enough statewide that we have qualifying regionals to make it to state. So if you have students that don't compete at at regional, they're more than welcome to come to state. If you have students that competed at regional, maybe didn't do so well, but it's going to take that feedback from the judges for their events, they're more than welcome at state. So we don't have any limitation at state other than certain events. We only allow 4 or 6 students or teams from your chapter, and that'll all be out on the state website, which will, like I said, will be updated over the break. So no, I always told my students when I was a chapter advisor that regionals was more or less practice. Go, present to the judges, work out some of my bugs and kinks with my teammates, and then really be ready for that state presentation that they'll be doing at the end of April. All of our regional events are free except for Moorhead, I believe, and I'll double check on this, but last year I think they charged $5 to cover the cost of some incidentals. That'll all be posted on the regional website as well. So another date to save, April 23rd through the 25th at the Crown Plaza. That's in Louisville. Once again, it's just kytsa.org/state. All that information, like I said, right now you won't see a lot out there. It'll say coming soon on a lot of it. That's my Christmas break project, is to get the website up and running for the 2018 season. That'll be here before you know it. And then national conference is in Georgia and Atlanta, so right downtown, which is exciting. It's a pretty easy drive for most schools to get down there. So it will be a pretty cost-effective nationals compared to some. When we're in Dallas or we're in Orlando, sometimes it's hard to get to by driving. And do know, those of you, especially new advisors to TSA, there is funding that will be available through our Office of Career and Tech here at the Department of Ed for advisors to pay for their travel. So last year, I think for TSA, we gave about $1,200 per advisor to pay for all of your travel, or most of it. It may not have covered everything, but we try to give as much as we can. We basically have a pot of money, and we divide it out by all of those advisors that are attending national conference. So look for an email after state. TSA is a little bit different, so if you're familiar with maybe some other student organizations, TSA, a lot of our events, you're allowed to send maybe the top 3 from your chapter to nationals, or maybe we're allowed from the state level, allowed to send the top 3 from the state. And I'll share with you where to go and look at that when we get to the competitive events guide. But I just want to make you aware that some of the events if you had a team that maybe came in fourth in Kentucky in an event, you may be able to take them to nationals if that's something you're interested in doing. Once again, speaking from prior experience as a TSA chapter advisor, if my students were not in the top 3, in a lot of cases the top 1 from Kentucky, I just didn't think they were going to be at the level at nationals to be very competitive. So that's kind of up to you and how you select which students you want to take to nationals. And by no means is it a requirement. So if you want to kind of take it slow and ease into regional and state this year, and then maybe look at nationals the year after, or what have you. I don't want you to get scared away thinking I got to figure out how to raise money to get all my students to Atlanta. It's definitely not a requirement. Once again, this is more for you to be able to maybe show to your state or your chapter officers or even your members, but I put some of the verbiage in here that you have. So the mission statement for TSA is in here, and this is all coming from the national office. But enhancing professional development, leadership, and career opportunities in STEM. And I highlighted the word intracurricular. A lot of people say, well, we just don't have time for an after-school club because our students are in band or they have football and they're tied up after school. So I did highlight the word intracurricular, so you can very much build in TSA and a lot of the competitions into your classroom, and getting those activities kind of infused into your classroom and not so much an outside the classroom environment, but actually do it during your school day. TSA's motto is learning to lead in the technical world, and then the creed I'm not going to read to you, but it's there, and we recite that at state and at some regional events. So it's there just so you have a place to go. So I'll send out this PowerPoint so you'll have all of this at your fingertips as well. So the next thing I want to talk about is kind of your chapter that you're going to be setting up, or you're interested in maybe setting up in your school. But the goal is to make kind of the STEM go beyond the classroom. So that's in relationship to the regional, state, and national events, and even the leadership conference that we have coming up next Monday. Helping students work on those competitive events, going to those conferences, and a lot of times the conference, a lot of it's the networking piece that comes along with it, and the leadership component of showing up on time and presenting to a panel of judges, and a lot of that comes along with it. So there's a lot more to it than just the competitions themselves. So bullet number 3 there talks about developing leaders. And we'll talk more about leadership and the leadership program TSA has here in a minute. Another thing that we do, so at the national level, the national office has the American Cancer Society as their service learning project. Our officer team this year decided they wanted to do a state level service project, and they chose the Ronald McDonald House to help basically have a statewide fundraiser. And so it's collecting pop tabs off of aluminum pop cans. The middle school and the high school that bring the most pop tabs by weight to the state conference when they register, we'll put them on a scale, weigh them out. We'll give a 3D printer to the school that brings the most by weight at the middle school level, and then a 3D printer to the high school as well. And then we'll announce that during the general session, which chapter won. And it's more than just the competition of winning a 3D printer, but giving back to our community. So we're going to actually give half the proceeds to the Ronald McDonald House in Lexington and half to the one in Louisville. So kind of split the state, and just shows students that it's important to give back to our local communities as well. So what's the benefit for your students? Because that's kind of what a lot of times students say, well, what's in it for me? So the competitions are kind of the main driver of TSA, and that's really what hooks a lot of kids and gets them engaged. Attending that leadership, regional, state, and national conferences are a big piece to that. But also teamwork, presentation skills. Think about a lot of the employability skills, showing up on time, meeting deadlines and due dates. A lot of the things that our industry constantly is asking for, so TSA can help with that. The service project that we just talked about, Ronald McDonald House, as well as the national one with the American Cancer Society, is a big piece to that. Networking with industry professionals, so especially at state, almost all of our judges are out of the industry, and they're taking time out of their workday to judge our competition. So it's a great time for students to get in front of those industry professionals. And then we also have some scholarships, which will be updated on the website. But there are different scholarships available. Some of them are based on the competition at state, so they may get a $4,000 scholarship if they win the CAD engineering competition. Some of them are application based, so some students may apply for the Kentucky TSA scholarship that we have, which is a $500 scholarship, and we give out 2 of those. We actually doubled the amount this year. Last year it was $250, but we have enough money in the budget that we'll give out 2 $500 scholarships. And we're hoping to build that network of scholarships for your students too. I talked about leadership. So the TSA last year adopted what they have dubbed LEAP. So we're all in the education world, and you know how we love our acronyms. So they went with LEAP, which stands for Leadership, Education, Achievement, and Personal Growth. So every student at the state level and national level, we don't do this at regional in Kentucky just because of the time constraints, but they have to turn in a LEAP document that goes along with their competition. So at the high school level, it's actually called a LEAP resume. At the middle school level, it's called a LEAP response. And then at the national level, for those of you interested in thinking about going to nationals, they have to do a LEAP interview as well. So there's 5 minutes during their competition when they're doing their presentation that they'll have to actually talk to the judges for 5 minutes about leadership and things that they've done to become a better leader through TSA. Regional and state in Kentucky, we are not doing the LEAP interview, which tacks on 5 minutes to every competition. We just don't have time at the regional or state level. But at the state level this year, this is new for all of our chapters. At the state level, we will do the documentation, so the LEAP resume or the LEAP response at the middle school level. More coming on the website again about that. So to learn more about the Student Leadership Challenge, which kind of ties LEAP together, and this book, the Student Leadership Challenge, is what we're basing our leadership conference around. So your chapter officers that come to leadership conference next Monday will be going through and learning about the Student Leadership Challenge and how to take that back to your members in your chapter. If you click this link, the neat thing about the Student Leadership Challenge, so yeah, there's a book and it's like $25. You can get a discount if you're really interested in buying the book through TSA, but they also have free resources for you as an educator. And this is what we'll go through in the breakout session during the leadership conference, is we're going to actually go through what are these resources, how can you access them, and then what can you do with them when you get back to your classroom. So helping you understand what you have at your fingertips that's not going to cost you any money. Also help you understand if you're really interested in Student Leadership Challenge, how can you buy the workbooks as well. But more importantly, the free stuff. That's always the important piece. So we'll go through that next Monday during the breakout session for advisors. So competitions, that's really the main driver for a lot of students, although the leadership, now that we do have a pretty robust leadership program, I do feel like that's going to be an important piece to TSA as we move forward as well. But the true engagement piece comes a lot of times from the competitions. So there are 30 plus in the middle school, 30 plus at the high school level. Some of them are team-based, some of them are individual-based, and a lot of them are based on communication. A lot of them are based around the engineering design process. You'll see a lot of environmental components to several of the competitions, as well as transportation, manufacturing, and construction. Another piece that's crucial, especially with some of the things that are happening with work ethic certifications and other things that may be coming down the pipe for schools, depending on legislation and that sort of thing, but are the 10 core leadership skills. So once again, talking about the employability side, or the soft skills, or what I affectionately call life skills, because if you have students that can't communicate or creatively think or make decisions, and if they don't understand ethics, they're going to have a really hard time finding a job that they can keep. So all of the competitions are also aligned to what TSA calls the 10 core leadership skills, and you'll see that later on when we get to the competition guide. So when it comes to competitions, one thing TSA nationally needs to do a better job of is figure out a way to have everything located in one place, but they simply haven't done that yet. So this slide should help you understand where to go depending on what you need to get access to. So I'm just going to run through these and click on them. You'll have access to this PowerPoint. You can click on them yourself. But I just want you to understand what's on each of these links and why each one of them is important. So bear with me while this loads. So the first link I put on there is what are called competition forms. So let me zoom in just so you can see here. So a lot of events, the students have to document, for example, the plan of work, so what they've done throughout the school year to prepare. So that plan of work log will be here, or system control, the inventor's log is going to be here. Or if you have students do chapter team, there's going to be some competition forms they have to fill out. Also, if they're submitting things that may be copyrighted, they'll have to do a copyright checklist so they have proof that they got permission to use it. And then you'll see down here for middle school, there's also some links. So for the LEAP response that I talked about earlier, or at the high school level, it would make sense that they had the LEAP interview there, but they don't. So I'll show you where that is as well. Sorry about that. So just links to documents. Basically, these are going to be PDFs that the kids can print or copy and paste into Word. Just generic forms that they can use. Most of them have to be signed by the advisor as well. Themes and problems. So one thing that TSA does every year to keep everything fresh and current is change the theme or the problem that the students are going to have to solve. So this page is crucial. You can access all these on the national website by going to competitions, and then competition forms you can see is here. Themes and problems is here. So you can get to them. I just wanted to make sure you had easy access. So depending on the event, it may have a theme. For example, Middle School Dragster is a very popular event. For 2018, Middle School Dragster, they're flashing back to the late 70s, and there were no shelled cars, so you couldn't put the wheels on the inside of a car way back when, so they're basically having a flashback competition. If you have students, let me find a high school example just real quick. So if you have high school students interested in doing the children's book, this year it has to be electronically enhanced. So somehow they have to have electronics built into the storybook. I think last year it was a pop-up, so they had to actually create a pop-up storybook. But anyway, a very important page for your students to understand, depending on what they're doing, what event, what is the theme or the problem. So make sure they're checking this page before they really dive in deep to their competitions. Next one are the level of competition. So these are just the general rules that apply to all the competitions, just generically. Most, a lot of them are you can't have explosives, that sort of thing. TSA at the at the competitive events for the nationals is 6 per conference. So this is just generic rules that apply to all events. So this is an important one to maybe print out and have your kids go through, or maybe have your chapter officers create a presentation they could present. Even little things like they have to bring their own pencil. If they don't show up to competitions without a pencil, they're not going to be able to. If it has an assessment that goes along with it that they'll have to write, like Tech Bowl, Technology Bowl, for example, or chapter team. So anyway, make sure you look at the general rules. Competition updates. So if they had an error in the book, which I'll show you how to get to the book here in a minute, this is where they'll fix the error. So this page honestly could change weekly. They usually do a pretty good job, and rarely do they have to post much on here, but they did have an issue with Tech Bowl at the middle school and high school level this year. So make sure you check this page as well. Just to have, that way, the last thing you want is your kids showing up to competition and they're DQ'd because they missed one of these competitive event or competition updates. So good page to check on occasion. So when it comes to, I mentioned earlier, regional, state, nationals all have kind of their own entry limits. So regionals, due to the building constraints as well as time constraints, we limit which competitions we offer, and also how many students or teams that you can actually enter. So those will all be updated very soon, as far as how many kids can you send to the regional competition in each event. There's another reason that some schools do travel to another region is maybe they have an event that they have students that are really interested in competing. So they go from Lexington in the central region and they'll go to Moorhead to compete. So kids will get some practice in that particular event. Or if they live in the West region, maybe they come to the central region regional. State also has entry limits. These are coming soon. Once again, posted hopefully over break. We'll get all these cleaned up. And then Nationals has their own list as well. So if you go out to the National website, if you're at the high school level, you're going to notice for 3D animation, we as a state can send 3 teams. So basically the top 1, 2, and 3 at the state event qualify for Nationals. But if you notice in animatronics, each chapter can send their own team to Nationals. So there are variances here. Most of it's based on the popularity of the competition. Like I said, my personal experience, if I didn't have a student in the top 3 at state, I just didn't feel confident that their skills were ready for a national qualifying event. We do have some schools that maybe their student placed first in CAD engineering, but then that student was really interested in doing coding. So maybe they sent their student to the national competition in CAD, but also sent them in coding. So that's one thing that I did allow my students, if they were really good at one event, but maybe they wanted to try another one, I figure since we were there, I went ahead and allowed. Once again, that's just my opinion, not something that I'm saying is something that you have to do. So all these links will be here for your use as well. One that came last year that actually we had several schools DQ'd. Last year TSA switched from a 3-ring binder to a portfolio, so a clear report cover like you see here. And this was specifically called out in the program, in the general rules actually. It's in this document. So they actually have a link, and we had several schools DQ'd on this last year. So you can see here on J, for all entries that require documentation, must be secured in a clear front report cover, and they actually have a link to a site, and it takes you to a picture. So when your kids are turning in any sort of report or documentation, we do follow the national guidelines, because the last thing we want to do is get a kid excited about state and they get to nationals and they're DQ'd because we had different rules in place that maybe they didn't. So please keep in mind that you do have to have these clear report covers. I know it's a small little thing, but we did have schools last year that sadly were DQ'd over that technicality, but it is what it is. So time commitment, like I mentioned, you can infuse some of this directly into your classroom. So maybe you have a dragster competition during class, and then the top 3 dragsters you allow to go to regional or state. Some schools kind of do a hybrid where they're having after-school work time and club time, but also doing some of the work. Maybe they have free time during class, or they have a study hall or a peer tutoring type independent study. One thing I would recommend is putting together a program of work, and this should be done primarily by your chapter officers, but what do they want to do? When do they want to do it? It also helps keep you on track as far as what's due when. If you need to do some fundraising, when's the best time of year to do that? Planning for that service project that we're doing at the state level. And then social events. So having kids, it also needs to be fun, so keep that in mind, that it's not all about the work, but also just the fun of getting students together that kind of have that common STEM mindset, getting them together. So I'll show you, there's actually a document that kind of helps you put together a program of work, so we'll get to that here in a minute. And then that last one, talking about getting it organized, is actually going to save you time, so rather than scrambling at the last minute to get everything put together, that's where that program of work really comes into play. 3 different ways to affiliate. I'm not going to dwell on this too much, but just so you understand. So depending on the size of your chapter, if you're interested, or maybe you've already affiliated as a red chapter, but you have more than 10 students, I think. Yeah. So red cap is up to 10 members, you can see here on the screen, and it costs you $150 annually to be a red cap school. So you could have 3 kids up to 10. White cap kicks in once you have 11 or more, so then you're paying $15 per kid, so 10 of that goes to the national office to help pay for the national conference. 5 of that comes to us at the state level to help pay for state conference. And then blue cap is what a lot of our schools are heading towards. So once you get up to more than 33 members, you pay a flat rate of $500, so $350 the national level, $150 goes to the state level. And then you can register you could register your entire school. And we have a lot of schools say, well, why would I do that? But if you recall the scholarships I talked about, maybe you have a kid that's looking for some scholarship money. If you pay that blue cap, register your entire program. So if you have a STEM program at the middle school, throw all the kids into it. Honestly, it helps us with numbers and showing growth. We do offer a free TSA polo shirt to any chapter advisor that blue caps and rosters all of their students into it. And then they get access to the scholarships, even though they may be not interested in the competitions, or maybe they're interested in the leadership piece of it and not so much the competitive events. But that's honestly a lot of our schools. We have probably double the amount of blue cap this year than we did last year. So that, like I said, that really gets to be a value if you're interested in enrolling 150 kids or 400 kids into TSA, and then you're just paying that $500 flat rate. So I want to take you in. If you haven't been in the system, I want to make sure that you're aware of how you can get in to affiliate, and also help you understand all the little buttons that are in here. So give me a second to jump out to this website. Once again, the link will be in here. It's also out on the TSA National page. So if you come over here, once you get to the home page, click on Manage My TSA, and then you click Chapter Advisors, because that's what you're going to manage your chapter. So that brings you to this page. Please don't ask me, I don't know why, but TSA nationally, you have 2 different logins. One is for the affiliation and updates, and then you'll have a separate one for total TSA. We're going to dive into affiliation and updates first. I'm going to borrow my good friend J.R. Dinkins' login. And so I'm going to log in with JR's. He's down in Glasgow and runs a great TSA chapter. Borrow his login to get into this system. So you can see now I'm into his page. Yours is going to look very similar. You'll have your invoice and payment screen here, which in his case he's already registered, so he doesn't have anything to pay as far as his affiliations. He can input a roster, so if you want to put 150 kids in, you can actually export straight from Infinite Campus and then import straight into TSA. He can view his roster. I'm not going to do that just for privacy concerns with student data. And then he can add, so if he forgot to add a kid or add an advisor, he can do that at any time. Right now it looks like JR has 17 students that he's basically paid for. So he has 10 members and he has 7 slots that he's paid for, but he hasn't used yet. If he's interested, he can convert to blue cap, and then he can register as many as he wants for that flat rate I mentioned. And then there's some things down here, so you can actually print membership cards for your kids to show they're a member of TSA. You can print certificates for them. So nice little features that are built into this, into the affiliation and update page. So hopefully that helps you kind of understand where to go. If you don't have a login, sorry, let me go back here and log JR out. So if you don't have a login, there's a link right here. So you click on this link. It's going to ask you your school name. If it's not listed, then you click not listed and kind of go through that process. And it'll basically email the national office, and they'll kick you back an email with your login. So you will have access to, the affiliation and updates if you ask for it. The only time you get access to total TSA is after you've paid your annual dues. So if you don't have access to total TSA, it's more than likely that you haven't paid your national and state dues, depending on what cap you're going in under. But JR did pay for it. So I'm going to use his login. Once again, it's a different, don't ask why because I don't know. Probably because they don't want you to have access to total TSA to all the competitions until you've paid your dues. But I'm going to log in as JR into total TSA. You do have to agree that you're not going to share this out. You're not going to post it to the website for the public to see. So you'll see JR is a high school teacher, so he has access to the high school competitive events, last year's scores at the national level, which is the conference high school competition scores. So if he wanted to go see how his kids did at nationals, he could click on that, and it's a huge file. I'm not going to wait for it to download. And then he has access to the competitive events PDF, the competitive events guide, and then membership materials, which we'll talk about here in a minute. So the difference between these top two, the competitive event PDF is nice because it actually downloads a zip file, and within that zip file is each competition by itself. So if you have a kid that's really interested in system control, you can just email him or print this off or put it onto Google Drive or whatever you use to get information to kids. So you're not overwhelming them with a 400-page event guide, but rather just sending them the competition that they're most interested in, or multiple competitions for that matter. The events guide is a PDF with every competition, 400 plus pages, built into it. And there's a lot more in here than just the competitive events. It talks about those general rules that I talked about earlier built into this. So right here, all the different general rules that you have to use, that portfolio, no explosives, that sort of thing. That's all built into this as well. It goes into some of the general attire, the attire they have to wear at the national level, what they have to wear when they go to nationals. Talks about STEM integration. So if you're trying to build a case of bringing TSA into your building, you can use some of this verbiage in this for your advantage. Talks about some science contents that are built into TSA, as well as I'm sure it goes into math, and it goes into some technology standards as well. Sorry, I'm just scrolling through this just so you can kind of get a sense of what all is in here. So these are all documents before the competitions themselves. So this isn't something the kids really need to see as much as you. So I always just sent my kids the specific competition or competitions they were interested in doing. This is an interesting chart, though, for students. So if they're really interested in, let's say, maybe they don't know what competition they want to do, but maybe they're really interested in architecture and construction. So you can actually use this chart down here. And it's going to tell them, based on the career cluster letter, which competitions are going to be good for them. This, once again, is just the high school guide. Talks about LEAP a little bit, and now it's going to dive into each event. This is, once again, nationally. So how many students can you send per chapter? How many can we send per state? That's all built into this document as well. And then it dives into the first competition. But you can see I'm only page 36 out of 403, so it's a very big document. I don't recommend trying to print it. But rather maybe just printing the first 30 pages if you want to read through that. Let's see. Yeah, so I talked about how to get to total TSA. Middle school teachers, you'll obviously only have access to middle school events. Some of you are a middle school and a high school advisor, so you will have access to both if you're rostered as an advisor for both chapters. Yeah, and then I want to talk about that membership materials document here in a minute as well. And then I briefly went into the competitive events guide, and we're going to dive into one event as a sample here in a second. So let's talk about the membership materials guide that you have access to. So when you log into, oh no, I lost my page here. Let's see, we're going to have to go back. When you log into your total TSA, you have access to what's called membership materials. So this is a PDF, rather lengthy, I would just look through it. It's 146 pages, but I would just look through it for the content that you're most interested in. But it does have a great deal of a lot of good information. So a real brief section on intro to TSA, a lot of what I've already gone through, the motto, the history, affiliation dues, that sort of thing. How to organize your chapter. So what's the role of you as a chapter advisor? What's the role of your officers? Maybe committees. Maybe you set up a fundraising committee of teachers, other teachers maybe, students, parents, maybe a good one on that one, or a booster club type feel. It also goes into maybe if you want to create bylaws for your local chapter, how to run a chapter meeting, some activities to run, how to structure the program of work. There's actually quite a bit on a program of work in here. And then it has some good fundraising ideas as well. So a couple of things that I've seen lately on social media, not just TSA, but just in general, a lot of schools are doing like a Meet Santa type night where they charge $5 or $10 to get your picture with Santa and do that as a fundraiser. And then another cool one that I saw, I'm actually taking my daughter to one, but it's a father-daughter dance. So they kind of create a princess type event for elementary type girls and their fathers. You pay and you get some food while you're there, picture once again, and then just a fun, neat, kind of unique experience. Another fundraiser idea, and I'm kind of getting off topic, but that's always a big piece to any organization, is how do you raise money to get kids to certain events. If you have a laser engraver, a lot of schools make a lot of money off of etching tumblers. I think Jay Cloud from Kentucky School for the Deaf is on this call. He does that. Andrew Shearer in Henry County does a great job of that. And that's one thing you'll note with our TSA advisors, especially the ones that have been doing it for a while. They really like sharing ideas. So I'd be glad to put you in touch with some people that do that kind of work. And they'd be glad to share their ideas with you, I'm sure. And then it goes into marketing it. So how do you market TSA to your community? So it does have a press release in here that you can use. It has access to the logo, so you can pull that down and use it. And then we do have a TSA week. It's actually in October, so it's already passed, but kind of helps you understand that as well. And then finally, it talks about the different conferences we've talked about, and then some promotional materials that you can use as well. So once again, it's a rather lengthy document, but it's got a lot of information in it. Just use the table of contents and don't spend your Christmas break reading 146 pages. But and so a lot of this you can put on your chapter advisor officers as well. So that kind of gives you an idea. So when you're looking for, if you want to use my PowerPoint as kind of a handbook, if you're like, where can I go to find marketing materials? My little screen here will help you know I need to go to that membership materials guide that TSA offers. So now I want to run you through a specific competition. So if you have students that are, let's say, interested in dragster design at the high school level. So I want to run through so you understand. Sorry, getting a little dry mouth. I had to take a drink of water. What does a competition actually look like? So I laid out here, bulleted out each section that comes along with those competitive events. And like I said, at the regionals, we ignore LEAP altogether. At state, we ignore the LEAP interview. So on the rubric, you'll see, actually on the state rubrics, we actually cross it off entirely. But keep that in mind, please. And then the attire you'll see and the eligibility you'll see in these competitive events is based on the nationals. So we don't follow that at the regional or state level. So I'm going to open up the high school guide. Let me get down to an event. So I'm just going to jump down to one that I happened to come to. Middle school, it looks identical. Obviously, it's just tailored to the middle school. So let's do animatronics, because that's the one I found. So it gives students a brief overview, also helps you understand kind of what the competition is about. So animatronics is getting a robotic device to bring something to life. So think about, I'm going to date myself a little bit, but think about Chuck E. Cheese or Showbiz Pizza back when I was a kid, and they had the band on stage that was a robot that would play Happy Birthday to the kids as they came in. So the overview just helps the kids understand. This one does have to include lights, sound, and an environment. So to me, that means it's not just a robotic parrot that talks, but it also needs to have sound and some sort of environment that it's living in. Eligibility, once again, this is at nationals. So animatronics at nationals is limited to one team. Time limits. So this helps you understand what the students do. So this one, they show up with something they've been doing all school year. They have 5 minutes to set up. They present for 5 minutes. They tear down for 5 minutes. And then once again, ignore leap. But they would at nationals have a maximum of a 5-minute leap interview that goes along with that. Talks about leap resume, or in the middle school one, it would talk about the leap response. Attire for nationals is built into this. And then the procedure. So this basically helps the kids understand what's going to happen when I get there, what's going to be checked in. They're going to submit their leap resume at the time of check-in. And then it goes through, helps them understand just basically that, so they understand when they show up what it's going to look like. Regulations are very important. So if a kid shows up with a 18-inch deep display, it's going to be DQ'd. So they do have to follow these regulations precisely. And the judges are sticklers. They're actually told to be sticklers on this because that's kind of how we weed out students that are following directions, which is an important piece to this. Once again, talks about that clear report cover. I know it's a weird piece to this, but if they show up with a 3-ring binder, it's disqualified. All about following directions. And this kind of goes on and on. So that's the make or break a lot of times for students. Talks about the evaluation piece, and then also in this case it gives them some links to some animatronics so they can go out and look for some ideas. The most important piece that comes along, so STEM integration talks about that, what careers are related to this type of event, which is, once again, if you have a student that's like, oh, I want to be, I really like electronics, then you could pull this out and say, well, this one says that, electronics technician is a career that relates to this, and maybe they'll get excited about that event. It does have the event coordinator, which I always made my students read this so they understood what the event coordinator was doing as far as getting the room set up. Will they have access to a power strip or not? So that'll be built into this as well. It says that there will be tables and chairs for the presentation, so the kids don't have to build a stand. They can actually sit it on a table. Little things like that are what really impress the judges when the students, you can tell they come in and they know what they're walking into, and it's not, where do I go, what do I do? Finally, the most important piece in my mind is the rubric, so you always kind of think about the end in mind. Most rubrics, if not all, now have what are called go, no-go. So this one right here, if they show up and it's not in a clear front report cover, it's a no-go, which means the students are DQ'd. If they show up and they don't have their leap resume, DQ'd. If they show up and they can't get the shell or the skin off of their animatronic, it's going to be DQ'd. This saves the judges a lot of times with those crucial pieces to this. But then most importantly, in that clear report cover, the documentation needs to include all of the following. Here's the test log I talked about earlier. So that's just that plan of work log that's out on the website. The kids can pull that down. Type in it or handwrite it. Typing I always recommend rather than handwriting. It just has a much more professional feel to it. They have to have an electrical diagram in this case. Fluid power has to be incorporated into it. So that could be some syringes with water or even air a lot of times. This is all about the presentation and the interview that comes along with it. So this one you'll notice is worth 50 points. The appearance of the model. So I always told my students, a lot of times it's more important to be really good at presenting than spending a lot of time making your model look amazing. Because you'll notice the presentation is worth 50 points, the appearance is only worth 30 points. And then the function of the model, so maybe it doesn't look the best, but the function, does it do what it's supposed to do, is worth 60. So that's a huge piece to this. And then, once again, LEAP, regional, and state. Regionals will not have either. State will have just the resume that comes along with this. nationals, they will have to have the LEAP interview and the resume. So this one you can see is worth ×2, so it's worth 20 points for the LEAP resume and interview when they get to the national level. So that's just a crash course on how to use these competitive events guides and kind of what's incorporated into them. And we're almost up on our hour, so I'm going to rush through a couple more things. One thing in that 400-page competitive events guide, there is an appendix at the very end, which once again has a couple of the things I've talked about. The plan of work documents built into that. The copyright checklist is built in. If you do any sort of filming or video, you do have to have a release form filled out by the people that are in that, so that's in the appendix. What the resume or the response looks like is in the appendix as well, so all the way in the back of that document. If you have a suggestion to revise an event, there's a form in there you can fill out and email in. If you get to regionals or state or nationals and you have a grievance to file, like maybe your students were told they broke a rule and they were DQ'd and you want to file a grievance, that document's also in here as well. So that's all at the end. All that's in the appendix. A couple tips I want to leave you with, and then I'm going to actually stop the recording and I'll unmute everybody if you have any specific questions. That way you don't feel awkward being posted on YouTube. So if you're interested in getting a mentor, I'd be glad to put you in contact with somebody nearby, or you can always use the map and find someone nearby yourself. But if you're not quite sure who has a really good chapter, I'd be glad to put you in contact with someone that's been doing this a while and does a really good job. Another tip, I always recommend that middle schools and high schools start small. So don't give your kids access to the 400-page guide, but actually just give them access to the 5 or 10 events that you're really comfortable in, or maybe the ones that you think your kids are going to be most interested in. So when you're going down through this zip file, maybe only give your kids access to Dragster and photographic technology and music production for year 1. You say, okay, these are the ones that we're going to focus on. Pick one of these 3 or pick one of these 5. But don't get overwhelmed with thinking I've got to learn 30 plus events myself so I feel comfortable helping kids get ready for this. Because the last thing you want to do is kind of feel like you're not able to help prepare your kids for these events. And then finally, promote this as much as you can, not only in your school, but also in your community. So you always get a lot of community support if you go to the board and you present what your TSA chapter did. Or you go and get on the local radio station about something you're doing. They do have an advisor's toolkit. So you can see if I click on this, so they have a press release that you can just basically tweak and change to make it your own and send it to the local paper. They have fundraising ideas here as well. How to promote your chapter, how to create a school presence, and then a little bit more on TSA Week. So this is similar to what's in that membership materials document, is also out on their website. And then finally, Perkins funding. So it's probably too late this year to get Perkins funding, but as your CTE administrators are saying that they have to submit their Perkins plan, do know that districts can submit up to 35% of their Perkins money, their federal grant dollars from the Career and Tech Education, or CTE, can be used for CTSO advisors' travel. So you can't pay for your student bus, but you can pay for your lodging, your sub, your registration as it relates to the competitive events or the leadership conference. Excuse me. And then you can also, down there at the bottom, those of you in the middle school, districts can choose to allocate Perkins funding all the way down to 7th grade. So if you're running a TSA chapter and you have 7th and 8th graders involved, I'm not saying they will, but I'm saying they can. They can fund you all the way down to the 7th grade. So that, once again, would be the same as what you see above there. The lodging, the subs, as well as the registration. So do know you have access to some funding if your district allows it. So that's something you'll have to talk to your CTE administration about, if they're willing to give up to utilize some of their Perkins to pay for your advisor expenses. Finally, as you know, ITEA, which is the International Technology Engineering Education Association, is our national teacher organization or professional organization, and they do give a discount to TSA advisors to be a member. Their national conference this year is in Atlanta in April, about 2 weeks before our state conference. So this just gives you a little bit more about them and the discount you get to be enrolled in that professional organization. All right, so with that, I'll leave this on the screen. I'm going to unmute those of you that are on here. If you have any questions, I'm also going to stop. Let me stop the recording